about 10 years ago, I was volunteering in Southeast Asia. And a healthcare worker asked me if I wanted to meet the girls that they helped in a local brothel. I was unprepared for that experience. It was pretty shocking, because when I say girls, I mean 13, 14, 15-year-old girls. And there was this one girl, a 15-year-old Muslim girl, who had been sold for sex since she was 13 in India and Burma and Thailand. And she basically changed the course of my life when she asked me a question. She said, "Are there places like this where you come from?" And I knew right here in Seattle that there were kids just as young as her, 13, 14, 15 years old, who were being sold for sex. And I had never done anything about it. And so it was heartbreaking to me, but I knew that when I came back, I wanted to help make a change. I'm Robert Beiser, and I'm executive director of an organization called Seattle Against Slavery. And we envision a community where no one is exploited for labor or sex. When I came back to the States, what I learned was that not only was sex trafficking here a horrible and violent crime, that it also was along clear racial lines of bias. In a county that is 7% African American, among the sex trafficking victims who are children in our community, 52% of them are African American. And it's not just the victims where racial disparity shows up. Of a 68% white county, the men who are arrested for buying sex with kids are 80% white. It's outrageous, and I wanted to do something about it, and the people in my community wanted to do something about it, so we brought together a team of leaders, starting with survivors from communities of color, and then connecting with service providers like Real Escape from the Sex Trade, Organization for Prostitution Survivors, and bringing in the tech experts, people like Microsoft and Tableau and Twilio, with advisors all the way up to Microsoft President Brad Smith. And we decided on two pretty clear goals: reaching the trafficking victims to help them escape, and deterring the buyers who were exploiting. And together, what we built was a tool called Freedom Signal. How Freedom Signal works is that most sex trafficking in our area is happening online, that traffickers have victims post themselves in online ads, and then buyers search the internet, find these ads, and send text messages to the victims. The first part of Freedom Signal was reaching those victims before the buyers could exploit them again and again, a thing that we call live text outreach. This allows service providers to send a text message directly to those victims online and give them an opportunity to escape. Now, the service providers told us, don't get your hopes up too high with your new tech solution. We do street outreach. And we have 50 volunteers who go out all throughout the year. And in a given year, we probably get between 3 and 5 folks out of the sex trade and into direct services. In our first pilot year of doing live text outreach with just one advocate sending text once a week, we had over 40 survivors who were able to get out of sex trafficking. It was incredible. Thank you. But what we saw was that these buyers were still out there. And so while we were helping victims escape, pimps and traffickers still wanted that money, and so they were finding new victims in communities who are vulnerable. So the second half of Freedom Signal was a deterrence chatbot that poses as a trafficking victim online, because these buyers don't know who they're talking to. So when they go and find an ad, they see bot after bot after bot. This is an example of a real buyer conversation between a guy who says his name is Joe and what he thinks is a potential trafficking victim, but is actually a chatbot. Says she's young, he says that's okay, and then she says, I'm just 15 years old. And you hope that Joe just ends the conversation there, but instead he says, yeah, no worries, babe, and sends a kissy emoji. Normally, this would be where Joe exploits someone for sex, but instead, this is where the bot drops the hammer and says, soliciting sex is a crime, you may be contacted by law enforcement, yeah. To date, we've been able to disrupt over 15,000 attempts to buy sex from trafficking victims online, which is incredible. Thank you. But we've just started here in Washington State, and we know that there are children at risk of being trafficked all over the country, and this is where you come in. What we need to expand this program is $250,000 to reach 1,000 trafficking victims, to disrupt 25,000 more buyers, and scale to 10 cities. We envision a community where no one is exploited for labor or sex, and you can help us make that a reality. Thank you.